Brighter Light, Darker Shadow by Backing into Infinity. Read by Oakshadow 5. This episode contains chapter 12 and 13, so we'll start with chapter 12, A New Sports Festival, part 4. Summary. The second round of the bracket takes place. Bakugo uses dismemberment. It isn't very effective. Monoma earns his tag. Katsuki crouched down at the edge of the arena, rage bubbling in his gut. 4Ace had dropped out of the tournament, giving Ibex a bye for the next round. Now, not only did Ibex lose a chance to prove himself, but Katsuki had to live with the fact that winning doesn't technically make him the strongest, since some of the fights ended in forfeits. The explosive teen shook his head, focusing his attention on the match before him. Arms was a tough opponent, and had almost beaten him in the battle trailer exercise. Katsuki needed to stay dialed in. He rubbed his palms together, then slicked the bottom of his shoes with his sweat. Shifting into a sprinter's position, he held his arms low and near his shoes. A minute later, arms cautiously slided out from one of the pillars, coming into Katsuki's view. A mistake, in his opinion. The boy lit off his palms, resulting in a quick staccato of explosions as his hands and then his feet ignited, notching him forwards like a bullet. Katsuki twists mid-air, pulling his front leg up and lashing out with a vicious axe kick as he flies into the taller teen. Arm stumbles, shoulder crunching nastily under the kick as Katsuki drops to the floor in front of him. They begin to trade blows, a rapid-fire exchange of explosions and crushing punches from all directions. Katsuki feels punches impact his arms and ribs, leaving nasty bruises and sore spots each time they connect. Meanwhile, every time Arms takes a scorching hit, he lets the limb be severed and grows it back. Seeing the other boy is winning the battle of attrition, and feeling the steady impact of fists start to take their toll on even his enhanced forearms, Katsuki withdraws. He hides behind the stub of a pillar and takes stock of the arena. Most of the pillars are shattered or demolished entirely, and the area where Arms is focusing on patching up his appendages is scorched and covered in debris. There isn't any obstructions left for a surprise attack, or any more pillars for Katsuki to duck around to avoid attacks. Time to finish this then. Katsuki stands, taking a fortifying breath. He calls out to Arms and then leaps into the air. He fires explosions at carefully chosen angles, slowly beginning to rotate faster and faster as he gains height, then orientates himself at his target. Howitzer impact! Katsuki dives downwards, rotating rapidly as he unleashes his strongest explosion at Arms' crossed limbs, webbing spreading between them to form a protective dome in front of him. The smoke clears a moment later, revealing Katsuki barely standing, using a pillar for support as he raises a fist in victory. Arms is across the arena against the only other remaining pillar, slumped over, unconscious. Midnight calls the match and announces a quick break to clear away the debris. Neto was facing a serious dilemma. While his classmates were very supportive of him, since he was the only representative left in the third round and had offered him any of the quirks he needed, it just wasn't enough for Todoroki. The boy was a monster when it came to quirk output, and his control was good enough to cause issues. Honestly, the best person to contact Todoroki was Todoroki himself, with the ice and fire sides in seemingly direct opposition, which led Neto to where he was now, in the depths of the stadium, hoping Todoroki had gone to the waiting rooms early after vanishing from his class seating during the break. Shoto! A deep male voice exclaimed from around the corner, causing Neto to pause and lean against the wall cautiously. You will cease this foolish rebellion immediately! Use my fire and embrace your destiny! No, father. Shoto Todoroki's deadpan voice answered, Neto flinching at the undercurrent of pain in the nearly emotionless tone. I will win this with mother's eyes alone, to prove to you that your perfect creation doesn't require your power at all. Your mother was weak! She gave you that scar and marred my masterpiece! If mother was so weak, why did she even bother to buy her for your plan then? Shoto retorted angrily, and there was a whoosh from the corridor. Neto glanced at the flickering orange light playing along the wall warily, mentally preparing himself to step in. He was already reeling from this conversation, so what would a little more excitement matter? We are finished here, father. I will see you at home after I win with just my eyes. Neto quickly stands up from the wall, pretending he had just been walking around the corner and almost bumping into the retreating flame hero. The man just grunted, glaring down at Neto with angry eyes. The copycat shook himself off as the man stalked away, grinning gleefully as he started one of his matches running. 5 minutes to go, and the match will start before that. Hey, Todoroki! He calls out. What do you want, Monoma? Todoroki says, voice chilly and eyes even colder. I just wanted to apologize for catching the end of the conversation and wish you luck in your match. You heard? Todoroki seemed surprised, as though he hadn't been loudly talking in a random corridor of a stadium with more than 1,000 people in it. Well, would you like the entire story? Sure. Neto is generally confused at the direction this conversation is going. What kind of person just offers to dump their trauma to an opponent they barely know? This was wasting plenty of time, though, which worked great for him. What do you know about quirk marriages? 3 minutes later, Neto blankly stared at the wall of his preparation room, the chill of Todoroki's handshake still lingering on his palm. He shook himself, starting another mental timer as he walked out of the room and up to the arena, the audience's cheers ringing hollowly in his head. Like, seriously, what the fuck? Todoroki was playing psychological warfare. There was no other reason to just drop bombs like those minutes before the match. Completely emotionless the entire time too. Neto was absolutely baffled. 3, 2, 1, begin! Midnight Whip cracks in the air. Then she hurriedly runs to the stadium wall and clambers onto a small, raised platform, judging from a distance now, considering Sarah's match. The air grows chilling, a crackling sound filling the stadium as Todoroki slams his foot down. Neto smirks, calm even as ice rushes towards him, filling in the gaps of the pillars. He fires up his first quirk with only 15 seconds to spare before it would have run out. Flame erupts from his body, hot enough to instantly vaporize the approaching glacier, a cloud of steam hanging low and swirling around the side of the arena. The crowd is silent, shocked at the sudden display of familiar power. And Monoma destroys that massive glacier with what appears to be Endeavor's own quirk? What a moment, ladies and gentlemen! Are we witnessing some generational strife here? How did Monoma get that quirk? Present Mike screams into the mic, causing Todoroki to start in surprise on the other side of the translucent barrier. Neto waves cheekily, flames puffing out from around his body as the time runs out on Endeavor's quirk. Even with the distortion of the ice wall, he can see that the shocked boy is shivering and feeling the strain of his opponent's attack. Neto shakes his body a bit, dusting off an invisible stain as he starts to advance towards the ice. I really don't know why you insist on using just one side of this, Neto calls out cheerfully, his left arm igniting into flame. It really is so useful to have fire to back and call, you know. Balances things out quite nicely. Todoroki stood shocked, watching the ice wall slowly melt like a deer in the headlights as Neto pressed his palm against it. His face was pale as the ice lowered enough to reveal it, and his eyes were frantic as they darted around the half-frozen arena. I will never use my father's fire, he sputtered viciously. It isn't your father's, Neto said casually, stepping over the remains of the ice. I can feel it in mine now, and I just felt Endeavor's fire as well. Not only is your quirk one single fused entity, not two separate quirks, but his fire functions fundamentally differently. I imagine he has a telekinetic ancestor somewhere in his lineage, whose genes didn't get passed on to you. Your fire is much wilder and purer than his. Todoroki backed up, stopping his foot and sending another wave of ice cracking towards the advancing blonde. I don't care. Fire has brought nothing but pain to my family. I will never break my oath. You know, Todoroki, that's so terribly arrogant of you. Typical Class 1A, really, Neto says, wiping away the ice with a swipe of his swimming hand, the two elements mingling into steam that swirled around him imposingly. Everyone here is giving their all, and not everyone is blessed with such powerful quirks as you. I have spent my entire life striving to grow beyond my lot in the genetic lottery and face an uphill battle the entire time. You can imagine my anger when someone with a great quirk like yours insists on half-assing it while facing me. The sheer disrespect of someone like you, a main character like you, insisting on looking down on the side characters for some childish grudge. Neto swung his hands forwards, activating both halves of the quirk, painfully aware of his time ticking down. Ignite yourself and face me, or I'll blow you away, he cries out, face angular and furious in the light of the flickering flames, steam curling off his shoulders and blowing away. Todoroki stares at his hands for a moment, before glaring back at Neto. His shoulder bursts into flame, and both boys' faces twist into a snarl as they unleash the full force of half cold, half hot. An explosion rips through the arena for the upteenth time that day, and when the steam and smoke clear, Todoroki is slumped against an ice wall, barely conscious. Neto is standing tall, skin glimmering steel as he stalks forward, grabbing the heterochromatic boy by the collar. Thank you, he mutters, before unceremoniously tossing him out of bounds to the cheers of the crowd. Ochako Uraraka was a very brave and determined person. She knows this, and everyone who saw her get fired up for the sports festival agreed. Still, something about Izuku Midoriya sets off her anxiety. Maybe it was a childhood fear of killing something if she dropped it from too high with her quirk, coming up against his tendency to drop off tall objects. Maybe it was how cheerful and happy he was until he got serious, and the terrifying switch between them. Maybe it was because the principal kept greenlighting the boy to have knives. Maybe it was his tendency to say hi to her by falling out of a ceiling tile. Maybe he was just intimidatingly attractive. No, probably not that. Regardless of the reason, Ochako grew increasingly nervous as she stepped up to the ring and waited for midnight to start the match. Somewhere across the small forest of pillars was Izuku Midoriya, and it was time to face her fears. She looks around the area, annoyed at how clean it was after being freshly prepared. She didn't have any ammunition for her quirk to throw at him, which meant close combat. And while Ochako had a quirk that was almost an instant knockout, Midoriya was demonstrably a monster at hand-to-hand. Ochako sets her teeth and runs onto the pillars, sticking away from the taller ones and watching the heights to avoid falling prey to the mistake that took Mina down. Sure enough, Midoriya appeared by jumping from the center pillar again, rolling across the ground towards her with a wicked grin. His emerald eyes seemed to shine with an inner electricity from the sheer adrenaline and glee, and his teeth felt like looking at a feral cat. Ochako tensed, falling into a boxing stance and preparing to meet her enemy. Midoriya fainted high at first, blade arm swinging towards her forehead as he dropped into a slide and popped up behind her. Ochako spun quickly, jumping backwards toward his two-handed swipe. A blade nicked her forearm, and she shivered as the current briefly ran through her. Midoriya circled her, clenching and unclenching his fists as the knife sparked and shimmered on his arms. He leapt forwards again, and they exchanged a series of furious blows. Ochako felt herself flagging, the brief nicks and electricity quickly taking its toll and increasing her muscle fatigue. She disengages and runs behind a pillar to catch her breath. Midoriya follows slowly, stalking towards her with an intense stare. His eyes seemed to glow with bioluminosity, an eerie emerald stare setting her on edge. Ochako wiped the sweat off her forehead, smearing it with blood from the small cuts on her arm as she does so. Her knees quiver as she settles back into a fighting stance and prepares herself. She did not prepare well enough, although nothing could have prepared her for what happens next, she thinks as she frantically defends herself. Midoriya leapt up and kicked off a pillar, executing a brief wall run before falling half a foot towards her shoulders, then struck at her as he knocked her to the floor with a vicious ace kick. They grappled furious, Ochako taking more and more cuts as Midoriya's grabs proved to have sharp edges. After a quick struggle, he has her pinned with a knife to her neck, the shot running through it making her throat spasm slightly. Ochako looks up at him, grin as sharp as his knives with his hair slicked back with sweat, and immediately bursts into tears. Midoriya scrambles off her with a start, instantly dropping the frightening aura and helping her up, expressing feelings of concern. He seems fairly confused as to why she is crying, and tries to comfort her about losing. Ochako doesn't have the heart to tell him the truth while he takes her to the infirmary. She started crying because he scared her half to death. That was chapter 12, and now we'll swiftly continue onto chapter 13, a new sports festival, part 5. Summary. The semi-finals occur. Bakugo gets his shit rocked. Briefly. Midoriya and Monoma make the audience concerned for their mental health. Katsuki stalked into the arena for a semi-final match with an unusual amount of trepidation. Not because he was worried about the outcome of the fight, quite the opposite in fact. Katsuki found himself not wanting to totally destroy his opponent. Ibex had earned his way to the third round, and then had his chance to prove himself taken from him, and Katsuki blasting him into the wall in a few seconds would only compound that tragedy. And the Insomniac had been growing on him recently, damn it. The match started, and Katsuki charged forwards, resolving to take a similar approach to his bout with Tayball and not use his explosions until further in. Ibex met him halfway and starts to throw insults and provocations, baiting a response from Katsuki. Katsuki responds with a firm fist to the Ateen's face, and the match begins in earnest. Ibex only started learning to fight a few weeks ago, and is no match for Katsuki's limited mastery of Taekwondo, but the explosive teen sandbags slightly, letting the other boy get a few hits in. Ibex realizes this quickly and grows more and more irate. His swings get more erratic, and Katsuki punishes repeatedly, spots of skin blooming to match his opponent's hair. "Stop looking down on everyone!" Shinzo cries, the angry outburst coming at the 2-minute mark of useless punches and even less useful insults. "Fight me for real!" "I'm not!" Katsuki cuts off mid-sentence, the distress and frustration fading from his face as his body stops moving. Ibex pants heavily in front of him, the crowd cheering his perceived victory. "Use your explosions, damn it!" The purple-haired boy screams at his unresponsive opponent, tears trickling down his face. Katsuki recoils inside as his hands rise, the familiar heat of a spark followed quickly by popping noises as he mechanically brings his hand to bear. Ibex seems to realize his error, panic flooding his face as he hurriedly decks Katsuki with a solid right hook, his first blow to properly land this match. Katsuki stumbles for a moment, feebly fending off the follow-up. His disorientation from the brainwashing slows his movements, and he takes several heavy blows. Katsuki recovers in a moment though, and straights with a smirk on his face. He starts to block each punch smoothly, advancing slowly in a walking stance as his hands crackle and pop. "Use my explosions," he says menacingly. "If you insist." The blonde jumps back suddenly, putting his palms together and bringing his arms to bear. Shinzo tries to dodge too late, his unconscious body impact the arena floor a moment later. Katsuki pumps his fist in victory at the crowd, who are listless and confused at the sudden turn in the fight. The explosive teen walks over to his friend and drags him into the stretcher. "Come on, Shinzo," he says. "Let's get you to the infirmary." Neto returned to the field for his fated rematch against Midoriya, feeling anxious. The gremlin of 1A had taken down his other opponents with almost laughable ease, and no quirk combo would give him confidence against that kind of overwhelming skill. Having Todoroki's quirk felt pretty good though, and the heartfelt thank you he got in the infirmary felt even better. Hopefully he wouldn't have to use his other quirks, because he wasn't sure that he could take Midoriya in hand-to-hand, even with razor-sharp and twin impact at his disposal. His wristwatch beat quietly, signaling the 3-minute mark. Neto shuffles in place and glances at midnight, anxious for the match to start. Midoriya wrestled him through a small gap in the forest of pillars, a wicked grin painting his face. The rope cracks, and Neto stems forwards, a web of ice spreading from his foot. He doesn't repeat Todoroki's mistake of obscuring his vision. The ice splits into 2 pillars instead. Midoriya comes barreling through the sole remaining parts as expected, albeit running in the air between the 2 icy pseudo-walls instead of on the ground like a normal person. Neto lets a smirk slowly inch across his face, lifting his foot to stamp again and finish the match. A thrown blade impacts his face a moment later, Midoriya having detached and launched at mid-air to disrupt the movement. Neto's foot slams down out of reflex anyways, the ice firing wildly in the form of a jagged web of spikes. Both boys stumble, blood trickling down Neto's face and Midoriya's side as they recover from the respective impacts. "You stabbed me!" Midoriya gasps out from a few meters away. "What the fuck?" "You want to talk?" Neto fires back. "You threw a knife at me!" Midoriya lets out an unacceptably pleased giggle, and Neto charges forward with his left side glowing with flames. The brunette dodges backwards, movements a little stiffer now, but still more than lithe enough to dodge the blonde. Gouts of fire erupt across the arena, ice steaming around them as Midoriya rolls and parkours his way across the icy pillars, and Neto gives close pursuit. Sweat beading across his brow, Neto stops for a moment to activate the eyesight. Midoriya immediately leaps backwards, twisting mid-air and ramming his remaining knife against the other boy. Neto convulses, current flowing through the new shallow wound. The blonde shakily drops off the pillar, standing a massive glacier above him to ward off his exponent. With no Midoriya in sight, and his timer on Todoroki's quirk running thin as he hurriedly forces twitching muscle to function again, Neto curses aggressively and re-evaluates his options. "And Midoriya is free from the ice?" President Mike's voice rings out and lets Neto a new sense of urgency in his planning. When the grenade drops to the floor a couple meters away though, Neto is prepared. Ice is already flowing out to meet him, flame hemming him in on one side as steam billowing around them. Midoriya rolls to the other side desperately, shoulder slamming against the pillar and grinding audibly in the socket from the impact. Neto curses again, Todoroki's quirk fading without finishing the job. No matter, at least he has a better chance than before. Neto manifests matching blades to Midoriya's owner's arms, and darts towards the half-prone brunette. Midoriya stumbles to his feet, leaning against the pillar as he skillfully fends off Neto's advances, singular knife flickering rapidly to clang against each blade arm in turn. "Why won't you go down?" Neto hisses between gritted teeth, pressing his attack and ignoring the weak current passing through his arms every time the blades clash. "'Tis but a scratch," the other boy says, an unholy fire in his eyes as he lunges forwards, slamming his shoulder into the wall on the way. There is a loud pop, and Midoriya screams as he drives his knife towards Neto's stomach. Neto jumps backwards, calling on twin impact, and causes the ground where he stomps to explode like miniature mines, covering his escape. When the rubble clears, Midoriya is shakily standing, wincing slightly as he rolls his relocated shoulder to test its strength. "What the fuck?" Neto breathes in fear. "What are you made out of?" "Spite," Midoriya says, sounding oddly honest as he runs forwards. Neto slams a fist quickly into the pillar beside him, priming impact locations before he switches back to sword hands. The two clash again, furious, exchanging blows. Midoriya works his free hand in now, going for grapples and throwing lightning-quick knife hands and punches at Neto's side whenever he lets his guard down. One such strike catches him in the cheek, spinning him around and sending him tumbling to the ground. Neto stares up at Midoriya, panting desperately as his opponent smirks in victory. He calls on his last card, using twin impact to detonate the pillar beside them. There is a roar as several double impacts all go off at once, and Neto is shot at rubble. When he cautiously opens his eyes a moment later, ready to meet his fate, Midoriya is laying unconscious a few feet away and bleeding profusely from a fresh head wound. Neto grins, waving at the worried visage of Midnight as she rushes over after declaring his victory, and then passes out unceremoniously. That was chapters 12 and 13 of Predator Dark Shadow. Midoriya lost in the semi-final to Neto. Neto got his revenge. But anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed this longer chapter than normal, and I see you all next time. Bye!